I always loved George Cooper. Looking at him, I thought, it doesn't get more perfect than this guy. Yeah, he drinks, he loves football, he burns himself out at work, but at the same time he adores his kids and he doesn't smother them with helicopter parenting like their mom does. But you know what really gets me about him? It's not his death. It's not his heart problems. It's not the Helga scene from Mary and George's roleplay nights. What hit me was one simple thought that landed on me just a few days ago. George Cooper was completely alone. Not in the sense that he was lonely in his marriage or that nobody understood him at work. I'm talking about something a little different. He was alone in his own house, surrounded by the very people he was burning his life down for every single day. And the scariest part? He didn't even fully realize it himself. Think about it. Most fans believe the main drama of the Cooper family is Sheldon, the genius kid. All his needs, his quirks, his career path, everything revolves around him. And when his dad dies, we cry because we feel real emotions for this guy. We know what he actually meant to this family, even more than Sheldon did. A lot of people think, man, Sheldon's dad died and didn't live to see his Nobel Prize. But they're fooling themselves. The depth of this character is something way bigger than the entire Sheldon show. The truth is, George lived in a family where literally every single person was emotionally plugged into someone, just not into him. Mary was plugged into Sheldon. Sheldon was plugged into his formulas, sometimes into his mom and Meemaw. Missy was plugged into her dad, but as a kid plugged into an adult, not as an adult plugged into another adult. And Georgie was plugged into Mandy and his own world outside the family. George was like a power outlet in this family. Everyone plugged into him to recharge, but nobody was charging him back. Honestly, when I figured this out, it made me really sad. The thought won't let me go, and it explains literally everything about his behavior. Hey, take a seat on Cooper's couch. Today I want to break down with you guys why this man was the loneliest person in the entire show, and why none of us caught it for 7 seasons straight. Let me start with what pisses me off the most. I don't even want to think about it, but for you guys, for this video, I gotta. Remember all those scenes where George comes home from work? He's a coach at the high school. He spends all day yelling at teenagers, breaking down plays, dealing with parent drama, getting pressured by boosters. That is emotionally heavy work. Trust me, my girlfriend works at a school as a regular elementary school teacher, and I'm telling you what I hear about every single day. The kids and the parents drive her nuts. Any normal person with that kind of emotional job, where every single minute pulls you into another interaction, comes home and just wants 5 minutes of quiet. Or honestly, the whole day. But in George's case, you just want anybody to ask him, hey, how are you? How was your day? And what does he get? He opens the door and walks straight into a war zone. Sheldon demands to be driven somewhere. Mary demands he fix something, explain something, or give her time as a husband. Missy is just screaming because she's a hormonal teenager. Georgie messed something up again. And not one person, not a single one, not once during the day walks up to him and says, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your health? Honestly, I never noticed this before. I just watched the show, I laughed, I had fun. But the depth of these characters still blows my mind. We never got a single scene where someone was actually invested in George. Yeah, the polite questions popped up sometimes, but they were just thrown out to fill space, not to seriously check on the dad. 7 seasons? Not once? Think about how that's even possible. George went out to the backyard with a beer, or sat blankly in front of the TV, not because he was an alcoholic. He did it because it was the only way to find a spot where nobody wanted anything from him. That silence on the patio or the glow of the television was his therapy. Cheap, ineffective, slowly killing him, but it was the only way he had to be alone. Look, everyone had their escape. Mary had church, Sheldon had science and his bedroom where he could just disappear. Missy had her teenage stuff, and a dad who saved her over and over. Remember when she had a crush on a boy and George taught her how to play baseball just so the kid would like her? Georgie had the streets, the girls, and eventually Mandy and the baby. And George? Sadly, George just had his spot on the couch, the local bar, a can of beer, and silence. And there's a detail here that just floored me when I rolled it around in my head. Remember how Chuck Lorre personally explained to Lance Barber how to play this character? He said, don't play angry, play hurt. And that became the whole foundation of the character. When George yells, he's not actually being aggressive. He's just a wounded man. When he drinks, he's not running from responsibility, he's licking the wounds his own family gave him. And none of them see those wounds. They see a loud guy in a flannel shirt, but they don't see a sentimental man who gets cut deep every time they ignore him. And when Sheldon, years later, says his father was an alcoholic, he literally doesn't understand what he was looking at. Because of his age and his intellect, he just couldn't feel empathy for his dad. The only time in the entire show where I actually saw Sheldon feel something was the funeral. Remember that scene? Sheldon was just shocked by his dad's death. The way he looked at people, the way he remembered their last conversation before his dad left for work. That's probably the only time Sheldon thought of his father not as a function, not as a guy who serves him. But sadly, in the Big Bang Theory, he goes right back to remembering his dad only in a negative light. But the most powerful thing that hit me isn't even about the house, it's about work. Or more specifically, the fact that George never had any real friends in his entire life. Try to name one of George's friends. Still thinking? Most people will say, Coach Wilkins, probably. Okay, but Wilkins is the guy who literally took his job. He's a co-worker, and they had a competitive thing going for most of the show. Yeah, they made up, and George took him in when his life was falling apart. But that's not a friendship between equals. That's George saving someone else again. And here I have to bring up what came before Medford, Galveston, his past, which explains his entire trajectory of loneliness. This man was a coach in Galveston, at a solid school, in a great job, and he finds out his co-workers are illegally recruiting players. Any normal person in that situation would just keep their mouth shut, save the job, feed the family, pretend you didn't see anything. But George reports it up the chain because he has a moral compass that doesn't switch off. And what does he get for it? He gets fired. They get run out of town and moved to Medford basically as refugees. And you know what Mary never said to him? Thank you for doing the right thing. I'm proud of you. She never really appreciated it. To her it was, George screwed up again. This man lost his career for being honest, and his own wife saw it as his mess up. There's the root of George's loneliness right there in one episode of Backstory. He made the right call, paid for it with everything, and not one person close to him understood the price he paid. He carried that trauma alone, just like he carried everything else after. And then remember Principal Peterson, the same guy who fired George and then helped him later. That's not a friend, that's just a boss who became a buddy. And you know who came to tell Mary that George had died? Peterson and Coach Wilkins. So at the moment of his death, this man's closest social circle was his boss and his former rival. That's not friends, that's just co-workers who respected him. And there's one more thing that just makes my blood boil when I think about it. Remember when he got offered the job at Tulsa? A college, a real step up, an actual promotion. It was his one shot at clawing his way out of this Medford hell. And what happens? Mary, like the textbook wife who's only focused on herself and her kids, throws a fit about moving. She doesn't want to uproot the family, doesn't want to pull Sheldon out of school, doesn't want to switch her church. Don't get me wrong, everyone's got their own values, but if we're going by the traditional family model, switching churches isn't exactly mission impossible, especially if it gives the family financial stability and helps the husband's career. But Mary didn't give a single damn about George's ambitions for the entire show. So he turns down the job. Again. He just buries his dream for the sake of a family that doesn't even understand the sacrifice he just made. And then, in the very finale, the offer from Rice University comes in. And now Mary graciously says, yes, let's go. George was over the moon. This man waited 20 years to get permission from his own wife to have his own career. He shelved his dreams for that long, and when he finally got the green light, he died literally a few hours later. The show is hitting us right in the face. Any actual fulfillment of his dreams while he was alive was just impossible. His loneliness was so total that even the universe wouldn't let him climb out of it. That's the moment I really lost it. And I started running through every scene in my head. Think about it. Mary has her church friends, Pastor Rob, Pastor Jeff, and there's a whole separate video coming about Pastor Rob. Sheldon has his weird connections with Tam, with Dr. Sturgis, with President Hagemeyer. Missy has tons of girlfriends. Georgie always has some buddies from school and the tire shop. Meemaw has Dale, her card-playing crew, and a whole criminal underworld. Every single person in this family has people they can go to and just vent. And George? At the lowest point in his life, when he and Mary were on the brink of divorce, when he felt like a stranger thrown out of his own house, where did he go? To the bowling alley, to Brenda, not to a best friend, to a neighbor he had some chemistry with, just because there was nowhere else to go. And we all know how that would have ended if Missy hadn't run away from home and forced him and Mary to make up. A 40-year-old man, a coach, a respected guy in town, and he doesn't have a single close friend he can call at 3 in the morning and say, Bro, my life is falling apart. I'm cracking at the seams. 0. Just a woman from the bowling alley he went to out of pure desperation. That's his real loneliness. Not when there's nobody around, but when there are tons of people around, but not one of them is on your team. And here's the second thought that ties it all together. Mary, his wife. Remember their story? A random meeting, a random night, an unplanned pregnancy, a shotgun wedding. They weren't meant for each other. They didn't choose each other out of love or shared goals. They got married because in 1970s East Texas, there were no other options. And then this girl found God and turned into a completely different person. The Mary that George married and the Mary he lived with in his last years are two completely different people. The girl he loved got replaced by a religious zealot who looked down on him every minute of every day. By the way, I really recommend checking out my last video on Mary Cooper and Pastor Jeff if you want to go deeper into the religion side of the show. And here's where it gets genuinely creepy. In The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon tells the story about how his mom once preached at his dad using dirty words because of some woman. Everyone assumed it was about cheating, but if you look closer at the dynamic between Mary and George and young Sheldon, it becomes clear. Mary preached at him constantly. He was living under 24/7 moral pressure. Every single thing he did got run through her internal filter. Is this Christian enough? This man was crushing beers out in the backyard or hiding out in the Sparks chicken coop, not just from being tired, but because in the living room, his wife was literally praying for his soul. Seriously, praying for his soul, like he was some fallen sinner who needed to be saved ASAP. I can't even put into words how lonely it is to live with someone who doesn't love you, but loves their project of saving you. Someone who sees you not as a partner, but as a test sent by God. This woman was plugged into Jesus way harder than she was plugged into her own husband. And George knew it. He's not stupid. He felt every heavy sigh after his jokes, every raised eyebrow at the sight of a beer can. He saw her going to church to find comfort with Pastor Rob instead of going to him. By the way, the Pastor Rob storyline is just brutal. Mary goes to a young, attractive, understanding pastor and has these deep emotional conversations with him about family and faith. She shares her fears, her dreams, her doubts. And you know who she never talks about any of this with? Her husband. She uses another man as her emotional husband and genuinely thinks it's not cheating because they're not sleeping together. And George sees all of this and goes to the bowling alley to Brenda. And he's the one who's morally clean here because he didn't leave, he didn't betray, he didn't take that final step. But he's alone. Completely alone in his own family. If this show were a little more grown up and not a family show, I honestly wouldn't have been surprised if they showed us a real connection between Mary and Rob. By the way, did you guys ever wonder where Pastor Rob disappeared to after George died? That storyline, in my opinion, never got fully resolved. Yeah, he moved to Arkansas for a job, but I don't buy that it just ended that simply. And here's what finally finished me off. Sheldon, the same son George literally rebuilt his entire life around. Remember the scene where George drives the whole family to Houston, to NASA, just to make an engineer look at the calculations of a 9-year-old kid? This man doesn't understand a thing about physics. He can't tell you whether those formulas are right or wrong. But he drops everything, gets behind the wheel, drives across half the state, and basically demands that an adult scientist take his son seriously. Because he sees Sheldon suffering. Because the kid gave himself an ulcer from the stress. And Sheldon doesn't remember this. Or rather, he remembers, but doesn't get it. In The Big Bang Theory, he tells the story about how his dad taught him to shoot near a raccoon so the raccoon would pee itself in fear. He talks about the bow and the cheap bourbon. He says his dad was just floating through life until the day he died. This boy, who his father shielded from the entire world, grew up and turned his dad into a cartoon in his memories. And the worst part, while George was alive, he didn't know any of this. He didn't know that his son would describe him as Homer Simpson in the future. He just saw that his son looked right through him. The son didn't know how to talk to his own dad because they were on completely different frequencies. And George really tried. He genuinely tried. He used analogies from sports, from the weather, from anything just to find some common ground. But Sheldon just shut himself off from those attempts because he thought they were beneath him intellectually. The truth is, only Missy really saw her dad. Only she, at 11 years old, used her own pocket money to buy him that best dad in the world mug. And Sheldon in the future will tell that story like it's a punchline. Like, look how worthless our dad was. But the truth is, Missy bought that mug completely sincerely. because to her, this man was everything. He was the only person who actually noticed her while the rest of the family was orbiting around the genius brother. And of course, this moment wasn't in the show itself, but we can think back to when Sheldon mentions the best dad and best mom mugs that belonged to Mary and George. I'd bet that best dad in the world mug came from Missy and nobody else. And sadly, Sheldon never saw that connection. He didn't understand that his sister and his father were this little alliance of two ignored people inside their own family. Just remember when George took his favorite daughter out to that lobster place. Or was it a crawfish place? Whatever that one place. Think about it. George had one single human connection in his family that worked like a two-way street. His daughter. A little girl who just adored him. That's it. Everything else was an endless burning of himself for other people who either didn't notice the sacrifice, or, even worse, treated it as the bare minimum. And now the most chilling part. Remember that George was a military veteran? He served in Vietnam. This man went through a war, and over 7 seasons, we barely learn anything about it because he doesn't talk about it. And who would he even talk about it with? His wife, who thinks war is a test from God. His son, who doesn't get basic emotions. Meemaw, who openly couldn't stand him for the first 5 seasons. He just swallowed Vietnam and buried it deep. And when the show shows you how calm he is under stress, how he covers his daughter with his own body during the tornado, how he goes on autopilot in moments of crisis, that's all the aftermath of a trauma he never unloaded on anyone. He lived with it alone for 20 years, just silently. And when all of this comes together in your head, his death starts looking completely different. This man died at work, alone, in an empty locker room. He had just gotten the offer from Rice University, the dream of his entire life. And he died without even getting to tell anyone properly, without getting to enjoy it, without even making it home to say, "Mary, listen, we did it." The writers did this on purpose, and it's brilliantly cruel because that's loneliness in its most concentrated form. He lived alone inside his family and died alone in an empty locker room. And even though they didn't show us or tell us exactly where George died, judging by how much time he spent at work, it was probably either the locker room or the coach's office. And you know what hurts the most? When they told him, "You got the job," that was the first big recognition of his worth in his entire life. Somebody finally saw him not just as a husband, not as a dad, not as a coach at some godforsaken school, but as a real professional. And a few hours later, he died. The show literally gave him one day to feel like his life wasn't a waste and then took everything away. At the funeral, his co-workers were joking around, and Missy got really upset thinking they were making fun of her dad. And Georgie explained to her, "No, they're joking because they loved him. That's how they grieve." And right there it hit me, and I just sat there staring at the wall. These guys, Wilkins, Peterson, the rest of them, they actually loved George. They just never told him. Because in our culture, men don't say stuff like that to each other out loud. Honestly, I don't always tell my own friends stuff like that either. And George died never knowing those guys cared about him. He died thinking everyone at work hated him too, just like at home. Although I have a theory that deep down, men know who their real friends are by instinct, even when there are no open emotional conversations between them. But sadly, the show never explored that. Here's the point. George walked his entire path being loved by a lot of people. His daughter adored him. His friends respected him. His wife actually fixed their marriage in the last months of his life. His co-workers valued him. Even Meemaw, who couldn't stand him at first, ended up loving him. But not one single person ever said it to him out loud, loud enough for him to hear. All that love was quiet, hidden, expressed through actions he just didn't pick up on. And that's why he died alone. Information alone. His family and his social circle had built up so much love and gratitude for him that he could have been swimming in it. But nobody knew how to actually deliver those feelings to him, and he left believing he was a so-so husband, an average dad, and a mediocre coach. And only after his death did everyone start regretting that they didn't tell him the truth in time. No matter how hard I try to watch Young Sheldon as a light comedy about a genius kid, I just can't anymore. To me now, it's a real tragedy and a deep dive into every single character. Every time George tightens his lips in response to another one of Mary's sermons, I see a man swallowing another piece of his own soul. Every joke he makes is an attempt to reach people who are listening but not actually hearing him. And the most painful confession in the whole finale is when adult Sheldon says his father just did everything he could, and that he did a lot. He says it years later, when he's a father himself. when he understands what it's like to be the adult in a system where nobody owes you anything. And only then does he realize he grew up on the shoulders of a man he spent his whole life thinking was nothing. That's the most painful kind of forgiveness. When the person you're forgiving has been in the ground for 30 years and will never hear your words. When Sheldon stands at Caltech in the finale and says, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he's only there because one tired coach from East Texas lived a quiet life full of loneliness, just so that moment could happen. And if you, like me, can't stop thinking about this man after all this, welcome to the club of those who'll be staying on Cooper's couch forever. That's it for today. I'm gonna go cry. Because while I was putting this together, I got really sad myself. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck.